Walking on my hands and trying to poop. That's what it is.
Just not a sexy joke. Hello and welcome to the Quackcast. This is the Drunkduck Quackcast number 511. I'm Ozone Ocean, and with me is Baines, Pitt, and Tance. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Okay, so we're talking about tension this week. Tension, building tension, and how do you do it? I've got a bad joke. Bad joke. Okay, a guy walks into the doctor's office and he says, "Doctor, please help me. Sometimes I think I'm a wigwam, and sometimes I think I'm a teepee. Sometimes I think I'm a wigwam, and sometimes I think I'm a teepee. What's wrong with me?" And the doctor says, "You're too tense."
Well
I was actually trying to figure it out, but couldn't. Nice job.
One of the jokes that never work if someone like me said it, because I enunciate every single letter of every single word.
I think you could probably do it. It's not a very good joke. It's an old British joke from the 1960s that I like to repeat over and over because I'm that kind of person. But building up tension. It's an interesting subject. You know, how do you do it in pictures or movies or writing? You know, we're comicers, of course, so we do it in pictures and writing. So there's all sorts of ways to do it. But before we get into that, I've got to bring up the featured comic. Okay, so the featured comic this week was a comic that I featured called Way Out There, which is a comic that builds up tension really well. So listen to this thing about Way Out There. Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean, and my feature for the week was Way Out There. A terrible disaster has befallen all of the earth. A lowly algebra teacher, Dork Schwawigan, Dork Schwawigan, and his evil sentient computer, Vid82, have somehow managed to scorch the entire planet and a good portion of the population, including himself. Thankfully, many were transported away safely, and in the process, they gained some weird space powers. Enter our heroes, 3 high school boys, Rollo, Jim, and Rich. It's going to be their job to combat the evil zombie, resurrected Dork Schwawigan, and save the universe. This is an action comedy sci-fi story drawn with pens on paper and digitally coloured. So it's quite a retro style in the cartooning style. You might find you sort of recognise this from the early 90s, late 80s kind of look to it, which is interesting. And of course, it's got the this nice. It's been digitally coloured afterwards, so you're getting the high definition version of a comic that I think was started quite a long time ago, and we're just seeing it being completed and presented in all its glory, its high definition glory. So it's quite a funny sci-fi comic about the adventures of these 3 boys and them discovering the big wide universe now. They've been burst onto the galaxy, and they're seeing, oh, we're not the only humans, and there's other humans out there, and there's people who want to kill us, and some people who want to be our friends, and all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff that's happening to them, and gaining weird kind of sci-fi powers and stuff. So anyway, it's quite funny, and I hope you enjoy it. I always love a bit of sci-fi comedy. So this is a comic by McGrenvian, and it's rated E. And that was Way Out There. Okay, so next up we have the featured music. Gun Wallace was weird. Well, weird. Gun Wallace did something different this week. He came up with a couple of themes, and he wanted to put it to the Drunkduckers about what comics these were going to be for. And the first theme that came out, Molly Lusk was chosen. Molly Lusk, and it really does fit Molly Lusk, which is really good because we all like Andreas Helixfinger, and so it, we already like him, and it's fantastic that this is being applied to Molly Lusk, and it really does fit, I think. So good choice. So this is an elegant promenading dance number with a stately rhythmic progression. Fine creatures dressed in their very best finery step and twirl on the dance floor in measured movements admired by a crowd of envious onlookers. So take it away, Gun Wallace, with Molly Lusk. And that was the theme to Molly Lusk. Say it really fast and it turns into mollusk. It's purely unintentional. Andreas Helixfinger never realised that was the case. No, of course. It was planned. Okay, so we're talking about building tension and how you do that in a comic. Now, my key strategy is to have like this high, this piece of steel cable, and the characters will lock it down into a solid concrete footing, and then gradually tighten the bolts, on this end of the cable until it, and keeping on testing it and ringing it until it gets nice and tight. So that's how I would build tension in my comic. No, I don't know. I build tension in my comics, but I'm not really a clever writer. I don't really plan it. It just happens. And I just do it by sort of, everybody talking about something that's concerning them and keeping on referencing it and going back to it. And so it's always in the background there. I suppose that's how I do it. What about you guys?
You'll do these sort of epic angles.
Oh, you mean artistically?
I would have thought like tension. Yeah. Sure, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Big angles and all that kind of stuff, like your and that thing you guys mentioned with decompressing your story, when you have all sorts of you're slowly sort of telling a thing through your panels by having the story not really progressing very far. So, you're not really jumping forward in the story, sort of going quite slowly, and that builds more tension than if you have a compressed story and you move forward very fast. So that's quite effective.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not as if all of the tension has to be contained within one scene, you know.
Yeah.
There are some cases where, like, especially if you have a specific sort of tension that's throughout your whole story, where you're waiting for something to happen, where it progresses as multiple scenes unfurl. But the thing with that is, if you introduce tension and then carry on in the story, it's good to make sure you don't let readers forget that tension. Because when you try to go back to it later on, it, I don't know, sometimes it just seems kind of, I don't want to say out of nowhere, but if you break that tension, it can be kind of difficult to get it back sometimes. Well, I'm sure in some cases it can work, but it's kind of hard to get it back sometimes. But
Yeah, you lose
I don't
the
know.
power of it, don't you?
I mean, if there's like multiple storylines or whatever, and then you
Well, yeah.
leave
So
it
say
and try
like
to come back.
something starts off and so take the movie for instance. Going back to movies, like we always do. But take for instance the movie Black Christmas. Intention works pretty well in that because you start off and there's some murders, and this goes for a lot of different horror movies have this format. You start off and there's some murders, and then the scene goes on from there, and you meet more of the cast, and you see like kind of the daily lives of whoever the focus is. But as that person goes through, their day or whatever, their week, however long it takes, more and more tension is introduced, and until you kind of build it up until the end. Whereas if you started with the murder and then it went on to the main character or whatever, and completely tried to just kind of disregard the tension up until the end, that would feel a bit disjointed. You kind of get a feeling after stuff like that, like, why did I watch all of this in the middle? I don't need it to be a surprise all of a sudden. I want to be, and maybe this is more just my inclination, but I like to feel like I'm involved in the tension, because that's when it pays off the most. If you have it building steadily the entire time, rather than just being like, here's something scary, and then all this goes on, and oh no, where did this come from? Out of nowhere, and then it's done. Then it's just kind of like, I'm not going to remember this.
Yeah, I think that's like almost the opposite of tension, right? Like it's sort of the shock thing that like gives you a second of like, whoa. I don't know if that's what you're talking about exactly.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. There's like a video about that, and Emma Claire talked about it way back in a news post, I think, about movies, more modern horror movies, using that loud, like musical sting to make the audience jump. And he showed some examples about how that kills all the tension. Yeah. It's like now suddenly, like, you don't care at all, because like you had that second of emotional release, and now you have nothing. And the video contrasts that with like a moment in the original Halloween where there's a little jump scare, but they don't overdo it with a huge bang. And it's like, oh, it's a little bit of a release, like a hand reaches out and it's the sheriff, grabbing your shoulder kind of thing. But it doesn't blow the tension because it doesn't, go overboard with the. This might be slightly different than what you just said. Sorry.
No, that's totally.
There is a way though. Like this is totally legit. If you cannot blow. I'm not going to use that expression. You are not going to. You shouldn't actually destroy the tension to too early by releasing the suspense.
Tense is so saucy and dirty all the time.
No, that's your brain. That's not me. However, there are ways to build tension, then release it. But when the audience comes down from that tension, they never go back to square one. They are at a higher level of tension, and they start building up again from there. So you get like each little peak of tension that gets released doesn't lift the tension fully. It just gives you a higher baseline, so you are actually still nervous.
Yeah.
And you are still primed for something bigger to happen. And that kind of
because you're still building it, yeah.
That scene in Halloween does work that way, where Loomis is walking around the dark streets looking for Michael Myers, and a hand sort of reaches out and grasps his shoulder, and it's like, hey! And it's the sheriff, are you okay? But Michael Myers is still out there.
Yeah.
It's like
exactly.
Same scene in Jaws. Remember the leg in Jaws? Like a leg falls out, and it's like, but the tension's still there.
The common pattern in this is that the small tension is released, but you also get a taste of what you are actually afraid of is still risking to happen in a sense, or could still happen, or things like this. So, for example, you might a little bit of that in Indiana Jones when he's I think in the Last Crusade when we see the heads ring from the Indian mooks that are being used by the Nazis as a fodder to figure out the traps in the end sequence, where he has to use his father's hints to figure out how to pass tests. We see the impact. We know and we see him sort of having close saves, not falling into it, not getting decapitated, in fact. But we still see that this is the stake. So now we aren't actually less afraid or for him or for his safety theoretically. We see that, oh my God, this is deadly. Make a mistake. I don't know what the next test is going to be, but if you fail it, you die. Every single time. You don't get the second chance to try it or anything like this. So that kind of small release in the tension is not actually going to blow the tension completely. Because it is just giving the audience a little taste of what will happen if X situation falls through. That's one thing. And the other thing, and now stop me if you want to say something else, I might be going on my soapbox right now. So the other thing that you could do is that you keep upping the stakes by having small tensions that are being built and stay there. And so that creates a bigger tension just by accumulation. At least I try to do that in Without Moonlight. I don't know if it works, but I do attempt it. When you get small little situations happening in parallel, Iris is talking with the SS chief, and they are setting something up, you don't know what it is. And then you get someone else having a small chat with, two resistance guys are chatting together and they are deciding something else. And then you get a third scene where things are are being set into motion, and that things are happening off screen while you are watching something else, but they are still in tandem and they are still happening, and you are waiting for the impact, like the result of what's going to happen. And hopefully this also builds tension, because you don't know what is happening, but something is happening, and this something is going to have an effect, and you don't know if it is going to be super deadly and kill off a character, or it is something that can be dealt with. So
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely find Without Moonlight is full of constant, like there's a constant sense of tension.
Oh, thank you.
Because of this, I mean, the writing, it's the situation they're in, but in the art, like the small rooms, the lighting, the shading, it all like bolsters that, like the story that they're stuck in. So you're always like, it's kind of like danger around every corner. You don't want to go to sleep at night, all that kind of thing. So it's kind of always there, even if it's not happening right now. There's no gunplay or anything like that happening right now. It's like, that's when it's like scary. You're kind of like,
I don't have jump scare.
No, you need to have a cat jump in.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's another way to build it. Like, you can be subtle about it, and just create a sense of unease in general. That actually is something that, if you are doing a war story, or like a story with that is by nature high stakes, it is easier, but it's not necessarily something that is done, in the sense that if you telegraph to the audience that the characters are going to be okay, no matter what, you don't have as much tension. Or if the story is extremely straightforward and you know exactly what's happening, like if you get a lot of hints that things are going to be okay, you may not have as much tension. I'm not saying that you won't, but maybe it's going to be like a little more, like the audience will probably still be interested if it is well written, like, I'm on for the ride and I'm going to have fun, and let's kill stupid Nazis that look very dumb and are not really dangerous, like stormtroopers and stuff. But it's not going to have the level of tension that you could potentially build if you play it up as it was.
You have like an uphill battle at that point to keep people interested. It's like, maybe people are interested for other reasons.
Yeah.
But with no tension, it's tough. There's a review. I'll send the link to Oz if he wants to put the link in the Quackcast notes. There was a review of the movie Bird Box, which I enjoyed on Netflix when I first saw it. And then I saw the review and I was like, yeah, they're totally right. Like, this movie at every turn undercuts its own tension in multiple ways by having what's going to happen, answering questions before you even get to ask them, the lack of rules to the scary things, and like just in all kinds of ways, it like destroys its own tension. And I find like a lot of newish movies will do that too by trying to be too clever, like the movies that will try to like mock themselves. And they're not comedies, but they'll try to like tell a story, but also mock their own story at the same time to show how clever they are. And that's tough. It's tough to pull off and still be interesting enough.
Yeah, they can break the tension. Or else, I don't know, they did it in the original Scream movie, didn't they? They mocked themselves because it's a meta thing about the structure, but they still retain tension.
They did it well, yeah.
Yeah, because I think they took the story itself straight. They played it straight while making fun, like being tongue in cheek really with the tropes. But
Yeah.
the actual story had high stakes. The actual story, like you weren't sure that they were going to survive, or actually you were sure that most of them wouldn't, the way that they were playing it. So that's
Yeah.
why there was the tension.
Yeah, that was really well done.
Mm-hmm.
The classic scene in the beginning of Scream that was a sort of lifted from When a Stranger Calls, the have you checked the children? Even using specific shots. Like I remember that movie when it's inside and like she's getting these phone calls and hang ups and then just the have you checked the children. This is directed at all the 75-year-olds who are listening to us today, if you remember this movie. But I remember at one point in that movie, it cuts out to the outside of the house. It doesn't show you anything. It's just the house at night, outside, really wide shot. And it was just so effective. And I remember when Scream did the same thing. It was really neat, like just in the middle to cut to the silent outside shot. I don't know why that works, but like a soundless, or in a comic, a dialogue-less wide shot can work. Like a lot of times can work for some reason.
Yeah.
Oh, that reminds me.
I find a lot of times in tense scenes, adding too much dialogue can quickly kind of kill it. You don't really want to narrate your tension. I find it's more effective when you see a character and watch their expressions and their body language and all that kind of stuff, and kind of absorb the tension that way, rather than having a character, and they have the expressions, but at the same time having little text box saying like, "Oh, I'm scared," or stuff like that. Like you don't need that extra inner dialogue. It's more effective when you can read it in the character. Yeah. That's why I actually really like the use of close-ups and stuff like that a lot. And it depends on what kind of tension is going on in your scene, but I like long shots that have the that set up the kind of atmosphere of the area that's going on. And I like when you have the shots where you can so this is where knowing your composition and how to create areas of focus really helps. Because I really like in times of tension when you can create a scene in a panel where you're focusing on something, but you're not sure what you're focusing on, but you're supposed to be focusing in on that area. That could be difficult to do if you don't really know what you're doing, but it can yield really good results. Like there's this one panel in one of the Junji Ito stories. I can't remember which. It's one of the short stories. But I remember there's this panel, and it's real simple. There's this character, and I think they're walking along railroad tracks or a road or something, and it's so simple. There's just like the tracks and like a town in a distance or something like that, but all the trees in front of them, especially since it's like dusk out, all the trees are dark, and you could kind of see the outline of like telephone poles, if I'm remembering it correctly. But it was so simple, but it was so effective in creating this air of, there's something unsettling about this place, but I'm not sure what it is. But then also, like I said, I really like close-ups of facial expressions as well on characters, and just reading the body language, because especially when you get nuanced down a little bit, it can be just really effective in getting people to kind of be in your character's shoes and stand alongside them for whatever's about to happen.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. Yeah, if you can draw people in, they want to know, like, what's this character thinking, or what are they going to do, or whatever. Yeah, that's awesome.
My speaking of characters' expressions and faces, One of my most favourite scenes in Bottomless Waitress was a scene where I was building tension in the bottom parts of the page. I'll link that to show you. It's page number 11, I think, something like that. Oh, page number 3. Oh my god, it's very early in the comic.
Oh, it's back in the 90s.
It was. So in this page here, I'll just describe it. The one of the characters, Jane, she's she's talking about how the sun is lovely and the birds and the trees because it's so lovely to be in love, and love is all, love is everything, love, love, love. And Polly, the cynical character, is just going, oh god, were those things invented this morning? Yeah. Polly's like, I am sick of hearing about this. That's her attitude. And in the bottom 3 panels, it's just Polly blowing smoke in Jane's face, and you see Jane being very, very disappointed about Polly's reaction, and there's that tension building between the two of them. So that was a lot of fun to draw.
Yeah. And raises the point that it's not necessarily like a thriller or a horror.
Yeah. It could be a comedy.
Story, right? To have tension. It could be a comedy. Yeah. It could be a romance.
Absolutely. You don't have to... We go to these kind of examples easily because I think they're... Well, for one, that's mostly what the kind of media that I intake. But, you can create tension in all sorts of things, whether it be romance, comedy, violent porn, whatever. You can create tension.
Yeah, like people want to know what's going to happen. That's the whole thing of anticipation and tension. People are involved, like emotionally involved, and they're into it, and they want to know what happens. Like that should be true no matter what genre you're doing. Because opposite of that is like boredom.
That reminds me, like if we take a movie that is definitely not horror and it's very kids friendly and all that stuff, like let's take Tangled for example, which is Rapunzel from Disney, and there is a lot of tension in there not because it's something that is too scary or too frightening or like technically, until the very, very end, there is no real threat to life. However, we care for the main character. We don't like her situation that she is basically being a prisoner and raised by her warden, in a sense. And we don't want her to remain that way. We want her to find her parents, have her love with the guy, and so on and so forth. So the tension builds when these obstacles that they meet make it seem that they might fail. So that's really, I think, the only real requirement for building tension for anything. Like if what we want to happen may just not occur due to certain obstacles that have to be overcome in order for it to happen, and these obstacles present a serious enough possibility of what we want not happening, what we want happening not happening, then you got your tension. It could be as simple as the Winnie the Pooh getting the honey or something like that. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. What the things we mentioned before was, what was it? The table scene you said.
Yes, if there's a bomb under the table.
Oh, I see. So this is Hitchcock.
Yes. Oh, that was my Woody Allen, but whatever.
Right. It was Hitchcock.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a classic sort of Alfred Hitchcock thing. Tense, you can say if you want.
No, please.
So Hitchcock's sort of everyone might know this already. I don't know, but like he'll say like if you're watching a movie and two people are having a conversation and suddenly a bomb goes off, you'll be shocked for 20 seconds or 30 seconds or something like that, and it'll have that much of an effect on the audience. But if you show them there's a bomb under the table where two characters are talking, then you'll be on the edge of your seat for much longer.
Yeah.
I don't remember if he gave an amount of time, half an hour even or something, 15 minutes like of this conversation where you're just like on the edge of your seat, like saying, are they gonna figure out there's a bomb there? Are they gonna get away? Like, is it gonna go off? Kind of thing. So that's the whole thing of like showing something, like showing a threat, showing the danger, or whatever. If it's not a horror movie, like whatever kind of tension-filled element or plot element you want to see, and then making people wait for it, anticipating what's going to happen.
And actually, it doesn't even need to be a threat. It might be like something that just raises the stakes. If you have seen Inglourious Basterds, the whole intro scene to that movie is a table scene. It's a table scene, and what is under the table is not a bomb, but it's people. It's a Jewish family that is being hidden from the great big Hans Landa Nazi detective. If you haven't seen it,
don't spoil it, Thomas.
I won't spoil it. Even though it's really an old movie, but yeah, by now. But it's masterfully shot. It's masterfully rendered as a high tension scene. That is I would say it's our cold open almost to the entire movie, and I think it's also the only part of this movie that is grounded to that reality of that era, in the sense that it sets a mood of the real situation and how it was before we are introduced to our larger-than-life characters that basically don't have that level of high. Like, they do, but not in that way, like not in the realistic way. But anyway, it's a masterclass for tension. This introduction to the movie, this first sequence when Hans Landa goes to this French guy's farm looking for some hidden Jewish people. So
yes, that's quite tense always. Yeah, when there's when you were saying before that the audience knows things that the characters don't necessarily know, so you've got that tension between those two things. I was thinking, for video game makers, a super common thing that they do to build tension is just add a time limit to something. So you can have any kind of problem to solve, but as soon as there's a time limit, it becomes massively more hard and tense. And your heart's beating and all this kind of stuff because you've only got so long. So that's their trick to do it. I don't know what the analog is in movies. It's a linear thing, it only takes a certain amount of time to go through the scene, so you can add time limits to what the characters do.
Have you not seen the movie Speed? There's a time limit. No, that's based on the Speed. Never mind. I was going to say something. It's literally called Speed, Deidre. Come on.
But yeah, so you've got those arbitrary imposed restrictions. Yeah, it could be speed or it could be time. I don't know how you render that in a comic, but you can. There was a whole TV series called 24.
Yeah.
It was all based around that.
Yeah.
And you can do that in a comic as well. You can say,
you can have time limits in a comic in the story.
Yeah, you can flashing on the time on a clock. Okay, this is 3:30, and then in the next panel, it's 4 o'clock or something like that.
It reminds me of the way that Uh, I don't know how it is now, but back in the early days of Spawn, the comic Spawn, there would be this kind of cryptic countdown whenever he would use his powers, and like this kind of hourglassy weird thing would show up and denote that every time he does that, it brings him closer to some end thing or something that's going to happen. Though as the reader, you don't know what that is. And it ends up being like, I don't know if it's Armageddon or what, or I can't remember, but yeah, that was pretty effective the way they did that in the comic, kind of a visual cue, and it's using a sort of icon, that a lot of people could recognize, the kind of hourglass. But at the same time, they don't give you a lot of information. So at first you might not think about it that much, you're more kind of involved in the story of Spawn and, Al Simmons and what's going on. But as the countdown gets lower, you think about it more, and it's this feeling of almost like, when you're trying to get your homework done at the last minute just before class. It's like, well, now I have to think about this, and oh shit, what's going to happen? Yeah. It's been all this time, but now it's too late. So yeah, that's one way in comics that they've done it. And maybe that's a little on the nose because it's like not a very organic way to show it. But you know what? I mean, this is our medium, and sometimes we have to be a little abstract about things like that.
Yeah, we do.
Yep. It's tough to do. We can't do music. We can't. I was going to say we can't do quick cuts, but actually we can.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've talked about it on the air, but your sort of scrolling comic, inspired by the Gloom, you said, like having more space between the panels and then less space between the panels as you scroll down.
Yeah, and the size of the panel. Oh yeah. In the size of the panel itself denotes space. There's somebody, I forgot who it was. There's this one guy who has a really good kind of short video about that on YouTube, about using panel size and composition, and how you can really use it to denote like the passage of time. Like if you have a large panel with a lot of dialogue, excuse me, I released some tension there. If you have a large panel with a lot of dialogue, that's going to denote a slower passage of time, just kind of subconsciously for a reader as they read it. Whereas if you have a small panel and it's just like a reaction or a single word or something, especially if it has more smaller panels successively next to it, then that's going to denote smaller passages of time, kind of all in a row, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of. I guess you can take the thing in quicker as a reader. Yes.
Yeah. Have we talked about?
It would accelerate your reading. That's cool.
Yeah. Have we talked about the idea of parallel storylines converging and how that can increase tension or breaking away? Because that's something that in novels can be really annoying. Technique they use to build up tension, in that you have two parallel storylines, your characters going off to do this thing and characters going off to do this thing, and whenever you build up to a sort of a cliffhanger and then you cut away to the other story stream, and meanwhile you're going, oh my god, how are these characters going to get out of it? I don't want to read about these characters, I want to know what's happening in this one. And then you build up to something with those characters and you cut away before you get up to the denouement or whatever, and then you go back to these characters. So you build up tension by parallel storylines, and A-B stories, that kind of stuff. So that can be a way of doing it. Just cutting.
Yeah, that's like the delaying technique in a way, right? Like you're cutting away to make people wait for the answer, and also you don't want to see things come together.
And you could also use it, with the A-B things meeting. They're going to converge. So you've got that.
Exactly.
What's going to happen when these two, streams meet? Are they going to, resolve the misunderstanding, or what's going to happen? Or is the huge battle going to happen? That's, these ones are spoiling for it and these guys are spoiling for it. And we're both getting both these characters talking about it in these two different streams and what's going to happen when they come together. So
right.
That's another way of doing it. Yeah, I often found that really annoying in books. The reason I came up with that, because I was thinking of The Witcher and they were doing it with the time jumps. So they had multiple storylines over lots of different time jumps, and that's how they built up tension, by cutting away, but also giving you, like, drip feeding you. Oh, so this is what happened back 20 years ago. And so you're slowly getting a bit more of the story to inform you of what's happening in the present.
20 years ago.
Yeah. Which, wasn't really told that expertly. Oh, go on, sorry.
No, I was just saying that the way that they did it, it was so this can be very rewarding for the reader, like be involved and piece things together and stuff. But the way that they did it in the series was so confusing that any tension that was going to be built was completely destroyed by, at least for me, for me as a viewer, because I was trying to figure out, okay, are we in the future? Are we in the past? Are we in the now? Where is the now? Who am I? Who are these people? Where are we?
This is not my beautiful house.
Yeah. So I forgot about the tension because I had to figure out everything else first. So yeah, tension, in order for it to be built, you have to have immersion first and not throw people out of the movie. And then tension can happen. That's another thing. And of course, there is this thing of the audience knowing what the characters don't know, as we said, and the tension being built for the audience while the characters are not actually tense, not yet.
Yeah, that reminds me, and I know I've brought this up before in a different topic, but again, why I love so much those scenes towards the end of the Friday the 13th movies, at least the earlier ones, where you get to that point at the end where there's one person left, and sometimes she hasn't caught on yet to what's happened to the other campers, but she knows she's alone now and something's wrong, and she's there in the middle of the woods, the wind's picking up, and as the viewer exactly what's been going on, and Jason's out there and that she's basically a sitting duck, but she isn't aware of it yet. And I love those parts in the movies because the tension is done so well. You just hear the breeze going through the woods, and you just feel that loneliness start to seep in as she's just slowly kind of starting to realize that something is very wrong and she's very alone. It's awesome.
Nice. Yeah, well put.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, we're gonna see him. We're gonna see Jason.
Another kind of tension that could be considered would be the turning of a reliable character or a reliable narrator into an unreliable one. And I'm thinking of a short story that I have mentioned before on occasion, called The Yellow Wallpaper. And it is about, narrated in the first person, limited. And it is about this woman who is confined in her room for being crazy, but she's not crazy. However, because she's being confined and treated as a crazy person, and other things also happen, it's a really good read. It's a short story, I recommend it. She slowly and gradually actually becomes insane. And the tension that is being built in the audience, in the reader, is when it's this creeping feeling that, okay, at first you root for her and you believe her in everything she reports and everything she narrates as them being real. And then there is this weird middle transition where it still sounds like it might be real, but you're starting to suspect that, okay, maybe something's wrong. And the thing there is that you have to figure out if it is right, if it is wrong. And then towards the end, when she actually, you can tell that she is insane, the tension has broken, but you still are mesmerized by the whole transition and stuff. It's really, really well done. But the tension is watching something that you don't want to happen in an arbitrary manner until England it is confirmed. So that's another thing that you could do, like get the tension from the development within the character, the qualitative development of the character. Maybe they are starting to become someone that you don't like or that you don't want them to become. Like, for example, a heroic character starts being slowly corrupted. And if it is done right, you like him or her at first, and then you slowly feel let down more and more as they descend from their pedestal and stuff like that. So that is also a tension to be reckoned with for the audience.
Yeah. Sure.
That is very much so.
Absolutely.
We are
people. I guess that comes back to something Oz mentioned, I think, earlier or off the air, that people have to care what's going on. They have to care about the character or care what's going to happen for tension to exist. That's kind of like ingredient number one. You have to care at least at some level about what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And I'm sorry.
No.
Okay. I wonder if that gets really annoying for our listeners to hear sometimes. But this is how we keep order here.
Exactly. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
But yeah, like I'm thinking of something that has tension, an element of tension, but that isn't dominated by tension. And the first thing that came to my mind was To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. And I don't know if you guys have seen that, but Patrick Swayze movie back in the day, and three drag queens are trying to make it across the country to go to like this big, huge pageant in like California somewhere, I think, and they get stuck in this little hole dunk town, and they make it fabulous, and they're like fairy godmothers who come and help everybody and give them whimsy. And while they're doing that, they're also dealing with tensions kind of within their own group and their own personality clashes and stuff. But through the whole thing, they're being stalked by this cop who pulled them over on the way there and tried to grab Patrick Swayze's junk, and Patrick Swayze shoves him really hard or hits him or something and is afraid that he kills him. And so he didn't, of course, but they drive away, leaving the presumably dead cop there, and then the cop is after them all in the movie because he's a spiteful little asshole. And but through most of the movie, you're not really thinking of how the cop is after them. You're mostly focused on where they are in the town. You know, are they going to be able to make a good impression here? And you know they're going to. It's a feel good kind of story, you know, and I actually like it a lot. But and so, you know, you don't really think any kind of big tragedy is going to happen or anything like that. But at the end, you know, the kind of lurking threat with the cop at the end comes through and he shows up, and I won't say how it ends. It's still a very feel-good movie. It's, there's no big catastrophe or anything. But that movie, so like I was saying, for that movie, that the tension of that cop coming after them, it's always kind of lurking in the background. You're not thinking about it a lot. And this kind of goes against what I said earlier about you always have to have the tension there or else it doesn't work. But in this case, the movie is focusing on other things. It's not necessarily about evading the cop. It's about kind of doing what you can with what you got where you are, and using your personal magic and stuff like that, and helping people. And then at the end, that cop showing up kind of serves as the final test to what's happened there. And if everybody's going to come to their aid and help the drag queens and side with them, as in the beginning they probably might not have done that. So
right. So you don't necessarily know exactly what's going to happen. You're not necessarily waiting for that cop to come back.
Yeah.
But you're invested in what's going to happen to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it plays out using. You don't know they're going to play it out by using the cop, but you're like subconsciously, I guess, like you're waiting to see, like, is this going to work out? Are we going to win these people over? Blah blah blah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's I guess that goes with Oz earlier. I think on our break, mentioned Chekhov's gun. I always forget that name, but I just think of the guy from Star Trek. To my surprise, it has nothing to do with the actual character of Chekhov, but I mean, that cop in this instance is Chekhov's gun, and according to how the tension kind of returns. So, like I said, it kind of goes against what I had said earlier, that you have to have that same tension throughout. But these are the kind of exceptions to where that Chekhov's gun has come back as a final test, but it's not detached from what's been going on. It follows through with the tension perhaps that there has been through the movie, or at least the conflict of seeing, will these drag queens accomplish what they can do in this town, and help bring people more to their side. Can these people in this town coexist and be friendly, and can everybody be their better selves, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, there's interesting trivia for that film. Of course, it starred, as you said, Patrick Swayze, known kind of tough guy from 80s films, as well as John Leguizamo.
And Wesley Snipes, too.
And Wesley Snipes, another tough guy. Yeah. Demolition Man and Demolition Man and Drop Zone and films like that. So tough guys. And there was tension on the set because Patrick Swayze wanted to punch John Leguizamo because of all his pranks and silliness, and he really hated John Leguizamo. And I don't think Wesley Snipes liked him either, so he was a bit of a scamp. So there was they hated each other, those actors. So there was tension on the set. A different kind of attention.
Yeah, I forgot John Leguizamo was in that too. Yeah. Wow, what a casting idea. I really like that.
Kidding. Yeah, it's great.
And John Leguizamo also in The Mandalorian. So.
Oh, okay.
And
that's right.
Spawn as well. He's in everything we talked about.
And Spawn, yeah. I always think of him in Spawn, even though he's like unrecognizable in Spawn.
Yeah.
He's an amazing actor. I love him. All right. Well, we're sort of towards the end. We're like an hour and 10 minutes now, so we should wrap it up. Tighter than a tight fist.
A taut spring.
Taut tension spring. Exactly.
I do like to end a lot of pages, and here this could be a cover image. I want to do this in my comic, so I don't know if I should spoil it. But in this episode, I got the inspiration. Just like someone asks a question like, "What happened here?" And then you just have like endless panels of like eyes, like pointing this way, eyeballs pointing the other way, eyeballs the other way, eyeballs the other way, like just endless panels, close-ups of eyes, like shifting back and forth. Endless tension.
That would be awesome.
That sounds like a fever dream.
Exactly.
We should have done that for a video, going up close to the camera.
I'll try to draw that as an alternate cover image for this episode. Exactly.
That would have been awesome. All right. Well, yeah. Thank you very much for being on the Quackcast. Well, listening to the Quackcast.
Thank y'all, folks, and Happy New Year.
Thank you.
That's all, folks.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.